Welcome back, dear viewers. Today is June 8th, and joining us once again is Professor Marandi. Professor, thank you for being here. The Middle East is once again on edge. Israel has carried out strikes inside Iran following recent missile attacks from Tehran, and the situation appears to be escalating rapidly, with fears that the region could be moving toward a much larger confrontation. What's your assessment of the situation, and how dangerous is this moment compared to previous rounds of escalation?
Thank you very much for inviting me. This morning, I've been busy with my colleagues in my department interviewing prospective PhD students. And the city is huge. And I did not hear any of the airstrikes that took place. There were, I think, 2 or 3 airstrikes that have taken place in Tehran, maybe 3 or 4, I don't know. But I didn't hear any of it. And we were just busy doing our interviews, which finished about an hour ago. And so now I'm not really up to speed on the news on my way here. I read a bit, but my understanding from my discussions with friends who are better informed than I, Iran has the upper hand. And the Israeli regime is not doing well. And the Iranian missile strikes have been very effective. And last night, of course, Iran fired, I think, 5 waves of missiles. And since then, they've been firing large numbers of missiles. I think it's probably approaching 100 by now, 2:30 in the afternoon, Tehran time. The situation, I think, is not going well for the Americans, and I think and the Israeli regime, and that's, I think, made pretty clear by Trump's tweet or his posts on Truth Social to end this immediately because his allies are not doing well. But this, I think, was an important event since the United States, obviously, in its negotiations with the Israeli regime and its proxies in the Lebanese government, it clearly had no intention of bringing about a ceasefire in Lebanon. And it just wanted to dismantle the resistance and allow the Israeli regime to maintain its presence in the country. And the Lebanese president, the Lebanese prime minister were both unpopular figures. In the last parliamentary elections, where the Hezbollah allies did the best, the president, his people did, I think, got 1/3 of the votes of the Hezbollah coalition. It doesn't have a popular mandate, and the negotiations with the Israeli regime, which are illegal according to Lebanese law, the only fruit that they bore is the bitter fruit of death, because hours after the meeting, or shortly after the meeting, and after just hours after an interview that the president of Lebanon made on CNN attacking Iran, the Israelis bombed a convoy of the Lebanese military, murdering a lieutenant general and his companions. So it just shows that appeasing the regime does you no good. Even when you do what they want, you give the concessions that they want. The very fact that the Lebanese regime, the Lebanese government, the installed president, prime minister, the very fact that they carried out these negotiations against Lebanese law was a concession to the Israelis. But they got nothing in return except for the death of their soldiers. And of course, the Israelis have no intention of walking away. So in that interview where he attacked Iran, it was ironic because the only country that is supporting Lebanon in the face of these violations of the ceasefire and this mass slaughter in Lebanon is Iran. What the Lebanese government is doing in Lebanon is basically preventing the refugees from traveling around the country. They won't let them go to different parts of their own country. They're cornering them. And they're trying to make this sectarian. So Western NGOs in Lebanon, Western embassies are encouraging their people not to allow the refugees who are predominantly Shia, but the supporters of the resistance are from all religious backgrounds and from all walks of life. But they're telling them not to allow them into your neighborhoods. And the Qataris and the Saudis, through their proxies, are doing the same. So they're trying to prevent the supporters of the resistance who lost their homes from finding refuge. And as a result, some people have died because they were forced to go back to their villages in the south, and then they were bombed and killed. So the Lebanese president and the prime minister have a lot of blood on their hands. And so the Takfiris, the Al-Qaeda government in Damascus, they are working with the Israelis to keep the border closed so that the resistance can't get assistance. The installed regime in Beirut is trying to corner them, and it's preventing any aid from coming from Iran or Iraq. So people in Iran and Iraq, they're gathering food, canned food, blankets, tents, money, but they're not allowed to send them because what the government of Lebanon wants to do is to crush the resistance. They want to humiliate their supporters. They want to humiliate really the majority of the Lebanese people. Why? Because they're proxies of the United States, because that's what they were installed to do in the first place. But despite that, Hezbollah has been striking back, and we've seen how effective they've been in such an environment, which I think is very extraordinary. And so the Iranians saw that when the Israelis wants to start bombing Dahia, that was the last place where these refugees could go. The people in southern Beirut, of course, in large numbers, they're large in number, and then all sorts of refugees from across the south went to Beirut. And what the Israeli regime was planning to do was to level the city. And, it's quite stunning. We live in a day and age where, since I was a kid, I remember, how Western governments always pretended to support human rights. The last 2.5, 3 years, of course, every day has been an eye-opener. But Western media, Western governments say nothing about the Israelis wanting to carpet bomb Beirut and to level the city, as they would say themselves. So the Iranians saw that the West supported this, and that the Lebanese government was supporting this, and that the Al-Qaeda government in Syria was supporting this. They said, no, we can't let this happen. And so they said that if the Israelis bomb Beirut, we will strike the Israeli regime. And the interesting thing is that for 3-4 days, I guess, I don't know the exact timing, the exact amount of time, but the Israelis refrained from striking Beirut. But as soon as the Pakistani Minister of Interior came to Iran with a message, and of course Pakistan is the mediator, the Israelis struck Beirut. So it's clear that the Israelis do not want to see any progress at the negotiating table between Iran and the United States. But in any case, in response, the Iranians felt that they had to retaliate, that they had to strike the regime. And I'm surprised that some people inside the regime thought that Iran wouldn't retaliate, that Iran wouldn't strike. And again, it just shows how ignorant they are, how the Mossad doesn't really have a grasp of reality and doesn't have an understanding of how the political leadership in Iran thinks and works. Because it's evident, just like, I've been saying for years that Iran will shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it will cut off oil. I've said it on your show many times. What I say is, I thought it was quite evident that Iran would do that. They didn't see it. And now they thought Iran wouldn't strike, and then when Iran struck in a very big way. The Iranian strike far outweighed the Israeli regime strike. And this is now sort of a pattern, because during the last week or so, or 2 weeks, during the last 2 times the United States violated the ceasefire and attacked Iran, Iran did the same thing then too. Iran's counterstrikes were disproportionate. They were much more severe in magnitude. So on the three last occasions, the Iranian responses against the United States U.S. aggression, and this against the bombing of Beirut, the Iranian response has been far larger than the original strike. So I think there's a lot that can be read into that.
It feels as though events are spiraling beyond anyone's control. President Trump has repeatedly signaled that he wants to avoid a major war. Yet Iran continues to raise the stakes, expanding the pressure not only on Israel, but on the wider region as well. Is this simply retaliation, or are we looking at a carefully calculated strategy from Tehran? Could Iran be trying to create a situation in which the United States finds it increasingly difficult to stay on the sidelines?
Yes, I think that the Iranians have basically done what you've said. The Americans think that through the siege that they can starve Iranians and bring them to their knees. But that obviously is a double-edged sword, because they're starving the whole global economy and doing immense damage. And the stock markets that have gone sharply down since Friday. I think that the energy crisis and the shortages that we see, the lack of helium and the shortage of fertilizers and all other petrochemical goods, this is going to this situation with the booming stock market suddenly not doing so well, and the global and the real economy in serious difficulty is going to get make the challenges much greater for the United States in the weeks ahead. So and its allies. So this double-edged sword is not necessarily going to bear the sort of fruit that Trump wants it to bear. And on the other hand, as you rightly point out, they've been trying to carry out low-intensity strikes for a host of purposes, to discover Iran's capabilities, to weaken Iran, to intimidate Iran. But I think Iran's responses in the last 2-3 weeks have been to intimidate the other side, to intimidate the Trump regime and the Netanyahu regime. And I think the Iranians have made it clear that they're fully prepared to restart the hot war. And this time around, it's going to be far more explosive. The Red Sea, as you rightly pointed out, is partially closed now. But this is sending a signal that if you push harder, then the Red Sea will be fully closed. The Persian Gulf is now closed because, as you know, every day the Iranians would allow roughly 25 to 30 ships to pass through. And for the last 2-3 days now, no ships are going through. This intensifies the ongoing crisis, and it creates greater pressure on the United States. And of course, Iran's military actions, as I said, send a very strong message. So I think this is just a series of miscalculations by the United States and its allies, and they still can't come to this recognition that they just can't defeat Iran.
By the way, I'd like to ask about something that caught my attention. Trump has been portraying himself as a mediator in the conflict between Iran and Israel, arguing that diplomacy can still prevent a wider war. He has made similar claims when it comes to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Do you think there are parallels between these two conflicts? And does this suggest that Trump is trying to apply the same diplomatic playbook in both cases? What's your assessment?
You know, Glenn, I think maybe I mentioned this last time, that maybe I haven't, but what Axios, which is completely unreliable, when Axios put out the comments made attributes it to Trump about when he spoke with Netanyahu, and effectively saying the world hates Israel, the world hates you, and all that. Are you crazy, or are you F crazy, and all that? Whether it was theater or not, I think it was sending a message. Because we are nearing the anniversary of the 12-Day War. And right before that war, we also had another Axios account of Trump and Netanyahu having differences, and Trump wanting to pursue a peaceful, a negotiated settlement, and then immediately afterwards they struck Iran. So obviously it was a lie. So nothing that Axios says should be taken at face value. But either he did say it or he didn't. It's really, to me, it's not really important. What is important is that this was published. And this was not a publication of, not an announcement of some sort of split between Netanyahu and Trump about what to do. This was a statement saying Netanyahu is despised, and because of him, Israel is despised, and that he's crazy. And Netanyahu took a big hit in Israel because of that. His opponents attacked him, his political allies attacked him, and I think he was damaged in the United States and elsewhere too, because many people saw the Axios report. I think that this is, in a sense, an attempt to weaken Netanyahu, not Israel. I don't see any space between the Trump regime and the Israeli regime. But I do think that since the elections are approaching, maybe some Zionists in the United States, the Epstein class, the Zionists, the Israeli firsters, I think maybe some people among them want to get rid of Netanyahu because they see that the image of Israel is being destroyed. They see that Israel is being delegitimized in the eyes of the world, and that they need a facelift. And perhaps if someone comes and takes over and Netanyahu loses the election, they can give Netanyahu's opponents are just as genocidal. It's a genocidal country, according to their own polls. But, if someone else comes, they can give a facelift, and all the media outlets could blame Netanyahu for all the ills and wrongs. They won't say genocide, but whatever. And then they could try to create a new image for a new leader. That's what I was thinking. I think the only useful thing for the political regime in the United States and in Israel to come out of such a report, especially since apparently multiple sources gave this information to Axios. The only useful thing that can come out of this, from my understanding, is that sort of agenda. Now, here again, we're seeing that Trump is saying, I'm telling him not to attack. He's wrecking the peace agreement. Why would he do that? Netanyahu strikes. Maybe Trump is fine with that if he strikes. Maybe and the U.S. is supporting him as we speak. U.S. tankers are refueling Israeli regime jets. The United States is trying to stop Iranian missiles. U.S. radar installations in Turkey, AWACS jets in Turkey and in Jordan, and they're attempting, and in the Persian Gulf, what remains of them are attempting to help the Israeli regime. They're helping. But why would he say that Netanyahu is wrecking a peace agreement? I think, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that maybe they want to say that Netanyahu is a part of the problem and that we need to remove the problem for a solution. This is just speculation. I've said it elsewhere and no one else has said it, so maybe I'm just talking nonsense, and I don't consider myself to be an expert on these issues, but I can't figure out any other meaningful explanation for Trump to say, I'm going to tell Netanyahu not to attack. And then he says, I was about to have a peace agreement, and then this happens. And what does anyone conclude but that Netanyahu is wrecking the peace? So the global crisis that we're experiencing is his fault. And I think the purpose is to ultimately get rid of Netanyahu. Maybe. But it still weakens Trump because it just shows that Trump is ineffective. Because for Trump to come out and say, I told him not to do this, and And then he does, even though all the funding comes from the United States, and now they want to merge the U.S. armed forces with the Israelis. It doesn't look good for Trump. For him to say, I told him not to do it, he can't do anything without my permission, and he does, it just makes Trump look like a nobody.
Yes, I think that's a very important point. When Trump claims he didn't direct Netanyahu, many analysts would approach that statement with caution. There may well have been more going on behind the scenes than we publicly know.
And when I say that there is an attempt to weaken Netanyahu, I'm not saying that necessarily he's the one behind it. But the people who publish the information on Axios, whoever they may be, I think that is something they may be seeking.
Professor, this is what many viewers find confusing. Israel carries out strikes inside Iran, airports suspend operations, and tensions continue to rise. Yet almost simultaneously, Washington and Jerusalem are sending messages about restraint and the need to prevent further escalation. How can these two things happen at the same time? Is this a case of diplomacy and military strategy working together, or are we seeing fundamentally mixed signals being sent to Iran?
Well, Iran has changed the rules of the game by saying that you are not permitted to strike Lebanon. From now on, the Israeli regime knows that Iran is dead serious. And if the Iranians say tomorrow, first of all, I'm sure that if the regime attacks Beirut again, that Iran will strike Israel hard. I have no doubt about that. Whether there's a ceasefire now or not, that's another thing altogether. And if the Israeli regime does it, they know what will happen now. And it won't be like one or two, or like they fired 2 or 3 rockets into Beirut. Iran fired 20 missiles. And they fired heavy missiles. And almost all of them hit their targets. And I think they fired mostly Khorram Shah 4 missiles. And almost every one of them hit their targets. So it must have been a devastating night last night. That's right. But so the Iranians are going to definitely change the way in which the Israeli regime functions in Lebanon, and that makes it much more difficult because they're not doing well on the battlefield, as you know. With regards to the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has shut down all trade now, and that is going to increase the pace of the global crisis. It's we're moving forward towards the cliff. The world economy, and now it's just going to be faster. And what the Yemen has done in the Red Sea raises the stakes, as they say, in the West. So, Trump, he's not Trump, it doesn't matter to Iran what Trump says. What matters to Iran is what Trump and his regime do. And for Iran, the agreement that we were very close to implementing with the United States a couple of weeks ago won't change. Iran won't give any concessions. There has to be an end to the war in Lebanon. The regime has to retreat. There has to be an end to the slaughter in Gaza. And the siege has to be lifted. Iran's sanctions on Iran's oil energy exports has to be waived for the duration of the agreement. And the United States has to give up its the stolen assets of Iran that it has. And Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz and allow traffic to return to the numbers that we saw before the war. That was what was agreed upon. And that is what Iran will accept. So Trump can say all he wants that I won't lift the siege until whenever, then there's no agreement. Or if he says I will, until Iran, I won't remove the sanctions until, then Iran will say, okay, then we'll continue with the current status quo, whether it's with violence or without. But Iran believes it will outlast the United States, no matter how difficult it becomes.
The world is watching closely now, waiting to see whether this latest escalation will be contained or continue to grow. We can only hope for a positive outcome. And with that, we come to the end of today's broadcast. Professor Marandi, thank you for joining us and for this insightful conversation. And to all of you watching, thank you for being with us. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. See you soon.